everyone's had a chance to review the minutes that were sent out earlier today, and we'll want to make sure that we can have a motion at the first part of our meeting to read those in and or any revisions that you might have seen. When I went through it, I saw some kind of proofreading types of errors, but I didn't see anything that was material that was missing. So we can probably move forward with that and anyone else's observations. The second agenda item that is remaining on the agenda, and we have some representatives from the project on this working session with us, is the Valley Vista Estates subdivision. There is a plat amendment that we'll be discussing regarding phase 1. There's some history there that we'll go over. This is a project that has been in a holding pattern for probably the better part of a decade or beyond. So we'll go into that, and depending on how things go with the working session, we'll either move right into the general session and then go through the agenda items and then have our training at the end, or if there's time and it doesn't take us long to get through this, then we can jump into some of that training before. So we'll just see how things go. With respect to that, let's move forward with our work session. Before jumping into the subdivision conversation, were there any other observations with respect to last month's minutes that should be brought before this body? Well, let's talk about subdivisions then. The Valley Vista Estate subdivision is part of the Mahogany Ridge development that was set up many years ago with Gray Jensen as the original developer. When that development was purchased by I believe it was the Walls, and others can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but this development enterprise inherited, based on an agreement with the city, the same development rights that existed and that were previously approved by Gray Jensen. So these are 8,000 square foot lots. They've already been approved, even though we don't have this in our code anymore. This is grandfathered into our code. And really what's happening with this particular plat amendment is, now that the developer's ready to come before the city and get the proper building permits and to get started on the project, there was a review with the streets and planning that had some recommendations. Hey, can you get these lined up a little bit better? That development's notorious for having some very narrow streets and a little bit difficult to navigate, particularly for emergency vehicles. And so the recommendation was to come back with a different street layout. And so that's what this conversation is about. It's the same lot sizes as the original development that's been pre-approved. We're simply looking at this new street layout. Now, that being said, we do have before us the conversation to discuss how that's rendered and where we go from here as far as making a recommendation to the city council. And I just want to make sure, Steve, because I'm on the wrong page here in my notes. This one's a recommendation and not an approval. It looks like a recommendation based on the notes I just flipped back over. Thank you. So that's the summary as I understand it, but I'd like anyone from staff to weigh in, Wes or Steve, and potentially weigh in and add more context to what I'd shared, and then we can go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you covered it really well. The developer is ready to get going on their project, and they were willing to work with the city at what we noticed would be a potential issue with the intersection at, I believe that's Clover Way and Sage Drive. So to prevent a issue with an intersection. We asked, and they decided to continue with a plat amendment. And this is just correcting that problem before it happens.
So one thing I was trying to find in the packet, and maybe someone can steer me to the right page. I wanted to see a version of what this looked like originally and what the correction now is. Because right now I think I'm just looking at the corrected version, but I can't picture what the problem was we were solving.
Teresa, can you show the zoning map?
Yeah. Yeah.
The zoning map will show it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Weston, while we're waiting, is the red light law enforcement? Red light blinking in your room? It looks like on the other shoulder. It's on the wall.
You do have an eerie backdrop with that blinking.
You're okay, huh? Right, it sounds like you're on mute.
Before proceeding further, too, I'd just like to remind everyone that this session is being recorded and available as part of the public record. I'll make the same disclaimer when we go into the general session, but just for everyone's awareness that this is being recorded as digital media that will be available in the future, and live streaming today. All right, so we have the zoning map up. Wes, do you want to walk me through what that change is at the intersection of Clover Way and Sunset Drive? Or what would have been the intersection? And you're on mute, sorry, Wes.
Thank you. You can see the curved road here at the lots in the green, starting with 664. If you follow that curved road all the way to Clover Way, that road intersects with a small private lane that then connects to Mahogany Ridge. And that's the intersection that we would like to avoid, is pulling traffic out onto a private lane that is not city maintained and doesn't have the width to support the type of traffic that could be produced on that.
Okay, so then if I look at the packet, there's a lot of zoomed in views. I'm trying to match that same road curve. It looks like on 18, page 18, are the lot numbers reassigned? I just want to make sure I'm comparing apples to apples. I don't know if I'm just missing something obvious there. 18 and 15 both look like they show that same curve, but then it goes into a kind of a knuckle corner. Yeah, right there.
That's right.
Is this the same piece of land as what we were just looking at?
Yep, that's right. So instead of going straight out through lot 14, it curves up.
Okay, so there's just that one access then through Sunset Drive. There's not a through lane, through that little lane into lot 14 that was there before.
Correct.
All right. So that's the change that we're talking about, is the cul-de-sac and that knuckle instead of the lane. Is there anything else that was different in this plat?
Not really. I mean, it obviously changed a little bit of the shape of the lots, but they're all in compliance with the municipal code. So nothing that stands out.
So, Chair, if I could interrupt, this is Ty.
Please.
So this also used to be a cul-de-sac at the bottom.
Okay.
This lower road now connects up to Old Highway for 700 East.
That Valley Vista Drive.
Yep, and this connects through to the other subdivision. So this is a lot more adequate to handle through traffic than where it connected to this little road up here. So that's what's different, is this used to be a cul-de-sac originally, and now it goes through. And this one had access through here, and it moved down to the end. And this solution here is actually better than it was here because the slope is less. There's less slope on this end of the subdivision than original. So there's just those changes.
And is this still part of the sensitive lands area where this particular part of the subdivision is?
Yeah.
Do these changes require any additional engineering based on that designation, or is everything materially the same?
All the requirements are the same. And so what was already approved and recorded, all of the same issues exist on the subdivision. So there's actually less concern than there used to be because of this slope here.
And that bulb, that turnaround that's outside of this phase, not that one, the one right above it. Yes, right there. That turnaround how does that fit in with this? Is that a future turnaround, or will that be built out as part of this phase?
Yeah, I think it would function as a temporary turnaround.
That's correct.
Well, this is the phase, but it'll eventually connect to another phase that would be up above.
Okay. So the only reason that this project's before us today, because technically they could move forward as is without making any of these changes, but it's at the city's recommendation to have them come back and improve the street infrastructure so the throughput would work a little bit better. And that's why they're before us, because it's at our request. Otherwise, they could have just moved forward as is. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Well, it seems like a good thing that they were amenable to working through the changes. What discussion items do other members of the commission have with respect to this project as we discuss some of the planning issues?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would like to know, how does the offset work with these lots with curved fronts? Is the offset just for the driveway, the 30 feet, or is it anywhere on the road? How does that work?
Are you referring to the setback of the buildings?
Correct. Because I noticed like over in Pheasant Run, the driveway seems to be 30 feet, but over next to the sidewalk, it's like 10 on one of the corners where it curves around. So I'm just kind of, how does that work? If you don't mind.
Yeah, so the structure, any of the structure has to be, has to meet the 25-foot front setback that's required. And so as that road curves, they'll usually have one point that meets the setback and the rest of the house is usually pushed further back. Is that what you're referring to?
So it has to be back. It can't be closer then.
That's right, yeah.
Like I said, I know there's a couple houses just getting built in town. Look like they're less than setback. So I was just kind of curious how that worked. So I see a lot of curvature here on the potential frontage. Well, especially the side lots. Lot 1, who knows which way that.
Yeah, lot one's a peninsula basically. So it's a gore lot. So it's going to have some odd setbacks. That one's going to have. Go ahead, Steve.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sorry, I thought you were done with.
You're fine.
Your ordinance actually has a formula for these strange shaped lots, and that's what Wes was getting at as far as the gore shaped lots. So I'll let him finish. Sorry.
No, you're fine. You covered it. There's a specific formula where we calculate a rear yard off of that, and it'll have I believe a 20 or a 25-foot side and front yard, and so it pushes those developments away from the streets.
Okay. Is there any grandfathers applicable here, or is it all to current code? Because I know that this is a, previous. Because I know that the driveways were, when this was considered, or the different phases, they were shorter. Now we've lengthened them out. So I didn't know if there was any grandfather clauses
Not on the setbacks.
Okay, thank you.
Weston, the lot size would be grandfathered, is that correct?
That's correct.
Did we gain or lose any lots in the change?
It's the same amount.
Okay, and just net.
So 24, I think, is the total there. Just out of curiosity, this is phase one, and I'm having a hard time picturing, where this is adjacent to all of the Mahogany Ridge development. Are there multiple other phases that are also we could anticipate coming before us with maybe amended plats, or does this fix any of those future problems and the other plats can just fit right into this, or what kind of traffic will we be expecting in other phases, if there are other phases?
We will. I mean, we are expecting to see other phases. I don't know if they'll need amendments, but I suspect that the developer will try hard to, position themselves to not have to come through and to doing another amendment. And I don't know how many times or how many phases they'll want to do, but there are at least a couple more phases that I suspect they'll be pushing through to get through the rest of their development.
And on paper, recognizing they may or may not all come to fruition, but on paper, how many lots are penciled in right now collectively with all the phases?
We haven't received an application, and the new subdivisions or the new phases will deal with the landscape ordinance. There's slope issues that they'll have to deal with. So they're working through that right now. So to calculate the number of lots that we would see, I wouldn't know.
Okay, so back in that zoning map, I thought it showed the lot.
That's the existing as approved today.
Okay, so only
Phase.
phase one was approved, but phase two was never approved.
Correct.
Okay, so when that comes before us, it won't be grandfathered in. It'll be subject to all the current ordinances, or would they still inherit the development rights with the 8,000 square foot lots?
It would be subject to all current ordinances.
Okay. This is helpful. What else comes to mind?
Mr.
Right.
Chairman,
Yes. Go ahead,
so
Dan.
on page 3 of the handout, talks about the recommendation from staff, and it says approve the plat amendment for Valley Vista Estates Phase 1, subject to the applicant meeting all city requirements. Are there other things that are known that need to be addressed at this time?
I'll let
That's real-
staff answer that, but I'm assuming that's in regards to the engineering notes and some of those outstanding items.
That's correct. They're just some minor outstanding items with engineering, but it's still in a place that it could move forward. So we just want to make sure that it's clear that any approval is tied to meeting staff recommendations.
Thank you.
Would that be, just out of curiosity, that particular language, subject to applicant meeting all city requirements, does that need to be explicitly stated, or is that kind of assumed in any recommendation that we make that the applicant will meet city requirements? Does that need to be called out? I guess is the question.
It's just, I mean, it's your safe catch-all. It's always nice to do, but yeah, you're right. It is assumed, but it's always nice to let them know that, just in case we miss something, if there's something in the code, our missing that does not excuse you from complying with that.
You know, Nate, Lance will tell us that the cul-de-sacs can cause some extra grief when it comes to snow removal. Weston, I think there were some notes on that. Would you comment on that, on how that would be handled there at that location?
Yeah, I mean, cul-de-sacs are always a little bit more difficult to deal with on snow removal. What the trade-off is a much steeper slope for the trucks to get up and down. And so in this situation, a cul-de-sac is potentially, much more favorable than a much steeper road to deal with.
It seemed like there may have been a comment on making a space available to store snow. Is that, or I may have been thinking about something else.
Yeah.
Between a couple of lots, there was a storage area for snow.
If I can comment on that, yeah, we talked about, and there is a note to between lots 14 and 15 to have on the plat a snow storage area where the driveways have to be orientated to where it leaves a gap between those two lots.
Okay.
So place to put that snow without causing a bunch of extra work with big driveways. And that has been mentioned on here, and will.
Good. Has been addressed then.
Is there anything else, as we look at those engineering notes? I recognize the city's got that under control. I'm just curious if there's anything that's causing any angst at all with respect to some of the staff on this one regarding the engineering.
Mr. Chair, I got a question.
Sure.
On the water retention, and I see in the notes that the geological survey was in 01. Has it changed over there? Has the changing of this road and stuff will affect those downward lots that aren't part of this subdivision that's to the south of this? I was just curious if there's a lot of runoff. Has things changed since this initial survey in 01?
Yeah, it's a good question, Mr. Woods. I'll speak from a non-engineering perspective. I do know that our engineer has worked really hard on this, and he was very aware of the detention in relationship to the ground changing since 01. It's typically ground movement with a geological survey and study. It is rare to have a change. Between now and 2001 is not a lot of time when we're talking about ground and the changes that can occur when nothing has been there's been ground movement, nothing's been constructed there. So it's a very short period of time when it's dealing with ground. So I wouldn't foresee any issues, and I know that our engineer was very on top of the common area, but that's as much as I could address there.
With respect to that, I'm curious. I know it's been a while now, but there were some developments in Mountain Green that were built on a steep slope, and they had some erosion issues. I think some of the houses' foundations and things were damaged and or destroyed. I don't remember all the details. Is there liability for the city based on that, or does the developer assume that, or is it buyer's risk? How does that work as far as putting up homes on steep slopes?
The city does not carry any liability with this. It's between the homeowners and the developer. And then obviously you'll have your geotechnical engineer and then the people that actually do the work. So no, the city's in good shape. It's one of those that it's the other way around. If we say, hey, this property is too steep or has too many of these issues, you cannot build upon it, then the city would have liability for takings, because the developer can come in and they can find an engineer that could, make about anything work. And so we're basically to the point where we have to rely on those experts to see what's going to happen or what can be done, I should say, now in order to accommodate the development. And so they're kind of the kings of that world.
Okay, thank you. We have about 2 or 3 more minutes before we need to transition to the public session, or the general session, I should say. And there is a comment in the chat. Jason, if you want to verbalize that.
Okay, yeah, and it's not in regards to this, and so I can be brief, and maybe we could revisit that in the training after the fact. But it would just be a question about the minimum lot width at the front setback of 80, and then the side setbacks of 10. I think what I'd like to have some discussion at some point is what we're doing with those rules, and I would like to revisit that in an appropriate time. We're causing a 60-foot wide home, and I understand it's a balance between, the developers are going to want to try to fit as many lots as they can in these properties for profitability. At the same time, what we're doing is we're causing, like if we talk to a developer or something like that, we're causing homes to be of a certain type. The way we live nowadays, we like bigger garages, we like 3-car garages. So our homes are becoming, because of our code, our homes are becoming narrower and longer instead of wider. And so I feel like the code, the 80 and the 10-foot side setbacks, are forcing us to have a certain type of narrow home that is forcing the developer to go deeper. And I'd like to just have a conversation about that when the timing's right, because I don't know, anyways, just a discussion about that when the timing's right, because that 80-foot minimum width and the 10-foot setback is causing a certain type of home to go on these kind of lots. And I don't, like when I look around my neighborhood, for example, I don't think we have those type of restrictions. Those get really narrow, and it becomes a concern for the way that people live today with the bigger garages and the wider homes. And so I'd like to talk about that when the timing's right.
Thank you for bringing that up. I think that's part of the responsibility of this commission, is to review ordinances, determine how they are impacting the community, and making recommendations if we feel like we need to make changes, so the city council can move forward with that. That being said, I think we can have the conversation. Teresa, I think we can move this to a working session discussion item. Potentially, if you want to move that into the April session, we can have a conversation about setbacks and lot widths and the ordinances that govern that today. Thank you. And that takes us to the top of the hour. So we'll pause for about 30 seconds and then jump onto the general session if there's other members of the public that may be jumping on.
Chair,
Yes.
we have 6 commission members and 2 alternates. So only 1 alternate will vote. The other one will just, so just make sure to decide on that.
Okay. Well, let's, which one was sworn in first? Was it Mark or I just lost my Dan. Was it Mark or Dan? I'm not seeing what the answer is to that, but whoever was sworn in first, let's have them vote tonight.
I'm not sure. This is Mark. I'm not sure who was sworn in first, but I'll be happy to do that.
All right, Mark, thank you so much. All right, well, I'm showing just after 7 p.m. on March 16th, 2021. I want to welcome everybody out to tonight's edition of the Morgan City Planning Commission. Welcome to you all. Thank you, those that are participating actively in the conversation tonight, for your interest and willingness to serve the community. Thank you for that service, and do appreciate that. For other members of the public that are joining via YouTube live, thank you for joining. And this session, of course, is being streamed live. It's also being recorded for future reference. So keep that in mind as you participate in tonight's commission meeting. We will jump right into our agenda. We'll go through our minutes from our previous meeting back in February. That'll be our first item of business, and then we'll go into our agenda from there. I'm hoping that members of the commission have had the opportunity to review the minutes. It was lengthy. We had a public hearing, so there are 8 pages of minutes, and thank you to the city staff for compiling those. And at this time, I would entertain a motion to move those, to approve those minutes.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the February Planning Commission meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Is there a second on that motion? I can't see. Someone's going to have to verbalize if they're seconding.
I second that, Mr. Chair.
All right, Mr. Ackett seconds the motion. Any discussion on the motion to approve the minutes? With no discussion, let's vote. I think I can see everybody. So again, Mark will be a voting member tonight. Dan, you will not. Everybody else on the commission will vote. I'll try to look for your hands in this grid. So all in favor of approving the minutes indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's unanimous. Thank you. We'll move into the remaining part of the agenda. We did have an item pulled, so the agenda has been amended. And so for those of you that are looking at the posted agenda, we're starting with item 2 for that reason. And this particular agenda item is related to the Valley Vista Estates subdivision. We are talking about a plat amendment for this particular subdivision. It consists of just over 7 acres with 24 single-family lots. The amendment that we're looking at is strictly to improve the flow and size of the streets that were set up. Originally, this subdivision was already approved back in 2006 through the Planning Commission at the city's request. Now that the developer is looking to move forward with the project, 14, 15 years later, the city has asked the developer to come back with a different layout for the streets that make a little bit more sense, that circulate better, that flows through the traffic better. And that's what's happened. So it didn't change anything with respect to the number of lots that were previously approved. This subdivision was taken over by the current developer from the previous developer and inherited the development rights of the property, which included the 8,000 square foot lots that we see in this plat that we're looking to approve. Those were, that was a allowed and approved lot size and zone before. And even though we don't have 8,000 square foot lots in our code anymore, at the time it was approved, and those are grandfathered in because of that. Before jumping into a discussion on this plat amendment, I just want to give the city an opportunity with staff to weigh in on any additional context that they would like to share. And I also know we have representation from the developer that I'd like to hear from next. But staff, if you want to jump in.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I was having problems with my mute button there. Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing this development come through, and appreciate the developer in entertaining the option to propose a plat amendment. This changes the road configuration. It does decrease the slope on the road to a smaller, so it's not as steep of a slope as you enter the subdivision, and it stops the intersection into a private lane, causing the majority of the issue why we asked for the change. So we're grateful for the proposed plat amendment.
Thank you, Wes. And then I think we had Mr. Wall on from the development team. Would you mind sharing any additional thoughts? I know you sat through the working session as well, and anything else you'd like to add as we consider this recommendation?
I believe it's all been covered pretty adequately. Sunset Drive was a cul-de-sac. We've connected that to Valley Vista Drive, and we've eliminated the connection above on Valley Vista Drive. And I think it's, like you say, it's better for the city. It's also better for us. We like this proposed layout better than the original layout as well. So I think it's a win-win for both of us.
All right, thank you. So the task before us then is, as a commission, is to make a recommendation for the city council to either move forward with the plat amendment as we're looking at here, or not. And so that's our task, is to make that recommendation to the city council. That being said, let's open it up for conversation amongst the commission and kind of chat about any planning issues or concerns, and move forward with taking a recommendation at some point.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Please.
this is almost coming from a more my job with the city more than a planning standpoint, but I appreciate the developer. I'd like to echo that, working with us. When I first saw this design that had been approved, I was scared to death of what we were going to be stuck with and some of the problems I feared would cause in the future. And I really appreciate them being willing to look at this with us and come up with a better solution.
Thank you for that. Other comments or questions about this project?
So, Chair, this is Ty. One thing that's not included in the packet that just actually came up just the other day, the fire chief also requested that Valley Vista Drive get a new name. We haven't talked to the developer about that, and it wasn't part of this plat amendment, but there's a lot of Vista drives. And anyway, when things get dispatched, they just want to know where they're headed. So I'm not exactly sure where that plays in, but everything else has been an improvement as far as I think the staff's concerned. We didn't mention, but I think the sewer actually will function better with this design, this layout than the previous one. And so there's, other underlying things that it's just a better design all the way around. So.
Is that an entirely new road, or is Valley Vista Drive already an existing road? And we're just talking about renaming a paper road, or are we renaming a road that's already in use?
It would be a new road. And I believe I don't know if the engineer did contact the developer, so Mr. Wall could address that, but I believe our engineer was going to talk to the Walls and just discuss potential other namings for the road.
I'll jump in here if that's okay. He did send us an email. We haven't spoken, but we are totally open to a different name on that road. We're not set on the Valley Vista Drive at all. We'd be happy to look at changing that to whatever works for both us and the city.
And just from a formality standpoint, since the plat that we're considering has the name Valley Vista on it, does that change anything with respect to our recommendation, or do we need to wait until the plat depicts this new name, or are we good moving forward as is?
You can move. Go ahead, Steve.
Sorry. Yeah, you're fine moving this forward, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
We were looking at Danny Wall Way. I didn't know how he felt about that.
Maybe a Hollywood Boulevard.
There's already a Danny's Way.
Well, Jacob's the next option. There's probably enough walls to name a street after each one of them, isn't there?
I'm curious too, and I should have asked this earlier, but given that the only change is with the street configuration and how that might have adjusted a couple of the lots, and knowing that the lot sizes were grandfathered in, is everything else? Are we just evaluating the street configuration as part of this plat amendment, or we kind of look at the whole project as a whole and individual lots and the detention areas and all the regular planning issues that we look at, or is the only thing on the table because it's grandfathered in just this what was changed?
You still need to obviously make sure that it complies with the ordinance, but yes, where they just made the street street configuration change, then that's all. The rest of the items have been approved, and most of those things, such as the detention basin, are more of an engineering issue and not a planning issue.
Sure, that's helpful. Thank you. What other questions do we have among the commission? It feels pretty straightforward. I don't want to draw things out unnecessarily. On the other hand, I don't want to shortchange a conversation if we need to discuss this in more detail and give it the due diligence that it deserves. So that we can continue the discussion, or if someone's prepared to move forward with a recommendation and I make a motion, we can go that route too. But again, I want to make sure that we cover the issues and not rush through it.
Chair, I got a question probably Lance could answer on the water runoff on that steep running down that road. Will it affect the lot below that, or is that, with all that building up there, has that kind of been figured out? Because it seems like if we get a bunch of water, it's going to come charging down that road pretty good.
I spoke with Matt, our engineer, at length about this. With the curb and gutter, the detention sites, the orifices to meet the water, it is kind of a bad design at the bottom where the water does get to a ditch. But over the ground, the very little water with the detention ponds, more than what there already is. The detention ponds and that will meter the water. You may get a slightly larger amount of water with the hard surface of Valley Vista Drive, but we don't feel it's enough to, and some of those issues like that, whether we do this or not, that's how it was going to be, whether we did this approval or whether we made these changes or not. But the changes we're talking about tonight doesn't change what was originally approved, and we don't really foresee any problems with water from runoff from getting to 700 East or the property below.
Thank you for that clarification. Other questions and comments?
Mr. Chair, just one comment. I mean, we're basically wrapping around a gun range at this point. Are we at some point? I don't know. I mean, I think you can hear the gun range from everywhere, and it is what it is, but it does seem unique that we're now wrapping homes around a gun range. I don't think that's maybe relevant to this conversation, but maybe as the future conversation goes, I'd be interested to see at some point, maybe the gun range needs to go to a different place or something, but I don't really know about that.
So Steve, you've shared with us before, I think there's a legal term for that, or at least an official term, when you have an existing use and then residential use is built around it, and that existing use now becomes a nuisance and nobody wants it there anymore, but they were there first. Is there any inherent right with the gun range to maintain into perpetuity, or can the residential use be loud enough and complained enough that has to move at some point?
No, I mean, if the residents want to take up a collection and purchase the property, they can do that. But the term that you're talking about it's called moving to the nuisance. It's open, it's obvious, it's there. If you select to have your home there, then that's your call. And it's one of those that if the developments around there are occurring in such a way that land becomes more valuable, then obviously a developer is going to go talk to the range owners, the property owners. But no, they will not be threatened by the gun range since they were there. Excuse me. The rifle range should not be threatened by the residential development because, as I stated, it was there first, and the people moving there are moving to the nuisance, so it is protected.
Thank you.
You know, this is Mark. I'm not sure, but I think on Mahogany Way, those people that are bordering the gun range, I think there's a berm that was required in that along their backyard. Maybe that's old history, but I think there is some kind of a berm along that Mahogany Way. Those people who have backyard is adjacent to the gun range.
And I can't speak to that. I don't know if anyone else can.
And that is easily something that the city could have required the developer to do.
If I can comment on that, there is a berm between the rifle range and those homes. I don't know that it really does much for blocking the noise or anything. I think most of the houses are taller than the berm. But in the engineering house, there is actually a note that asking on each individual lot, the plats or whatever, that there is a note indicating the noise from the gun range, so no one can buy their lot, build their house, and then say, well, I didn't know it was there. So there is a note that addresses that on the engineering note.
Thank you. Mr. Ackett, I hope that helped address your question.
Yep, all good. I get it. I was just thinking, I'm not saying the gun range is a bad thing, or I like to go shoot over there. I was just thinking, like you said, at some point, maybe the land will be so much valuable that somebody will sell the gun range and they'll move somewhere else. I don't know. And I'm cool with it where it is. It just seemed like we're wrapping around it. And so it seems just kind of interesting. That's all.
It's a good question. What else?
I can make a motion if we're to that point.
You are welcome to make a motion.
Awesome. Well, I recommend that the Planning Commission, we forward a positive recommendation to the City Council to approve the plat amendment for Valley Vista Estate Phase 1, subject to the applicant meeting all city requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Ackett. We have a motion on the table. Do we have a second on this motion?
I'd like
Let's see. Thanks, Mr. Prescott. Second of the motion. Any discussion on this motion?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think we need to add in subject to the name change also, make sure that's on there, the street.
And Mr. Ackett, would you accept that as a friendly amendment to your motion?
Yes.
And Lance, to second that? Okay, any other discussion on this motion? Let's go ahead and vote. Again, I'm going to be looking for your hands in the video feed. I think I can see everybody. I'll just count as we go. All in favor of the motion as outlined, indicate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 affirmatives. That motion passes unanimously to forward a positive recommendation to the City Council as outlined in Mr. Ackett's original motion. Thank you. That concludes our formal part of our agenda items. I shouldn't say it that way. We have a really special agenda item, which is to train some of our training as we continue to grow and develop as commissioners. This is kind of on-the-job training each month as hopefully we're getting better and better at understanding our responsibilities. And so this week on the agenda, we have training that Mr. Steve Garside will facilitate, and we're at that point. So Steve, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope that this is a good discussion, that people have a lot of questions. You know, it's your position as planning commissioners is pretty interesting, because it's anytime a city wants to exercise any type of zoning regulations, they have to have a planning commission. And so you are filling a required position. And so it's also put you in an interesting spot, because it adds a few hats to your closet. I mean, the different hats that you get to wear, because I mean, you're going to make some decisions that are not popular with your neighbors. Then you're going to you might make decisions that are, popular with half the people, and the other people are unhappy with you. Like sitting in a planning commission meeting once, and after kind of a heated debate, one of the commissioners said, "Man, this is kind of like being a referee in a church basketball game." So anyway, never really appreciated for the work that you do, but as stated, it's important, and it's something that the city is required to do. And so it is important that you participate in it. And a couple of things I wanted to talk about, again, the different hats that you wear. Even as a planning commissioner, you wear different hats. Some of the applications that will come before you, you have some discretion that you can exercise. Others, and this is kind of a source of frustration, other applications that come to you, you don't have discretion. That doesn't mean that you're rubber stamping it. You're just ensuring that the ordinance has been met. And so we'll talk about a couple of those. We'll go ahead and do that right now. For example, when it comes to a zoning change or a change to the general plan, that is where the Planning Commission exercise its discretion. That's where you're interpreting the application of the zoning application to the plan. And so that is where you would exercise some discretion. An area where you would not basically is the application that was just before you tonight. If that, and that doesn't mean that you don't ask the questions that you ask, because those are good, but basically once that plat has met the city code, then you don't have any discretion. That's your job, is to make sure that it met. And once that is done, then off it goes. And so when you do exercise your discretion, obviously you're making recommendations to the city council. Now, in some cities, I've seen where there's been a little bit of a conflict between the planning commission and the city council, because we do all this work and then we send it up to you and you make a different decision. Well, that's the difference between your roles. I mean, you do have a constituent. Your constituent is the city's code, but the city council, their constituency obviously is the citizenry. And so the difference is that you have the opportunity to shape policy, but not to make policy. It's the city council that they received your input. And so that's why it's important that when you have an action that's before you, in which you do exercise your discretion, that when you cast your vote or state your position, that you explain that position to the city council so that they can have that input. And that's reflected generally in the minutes, and then staff will always try to include that in their comments as well. As you come onto the Planning Commission, especially those of you that are new, obviously there's a lot of things to learn. The processes that we learn, and then of course there's always Weston's favorite language, which is called planner ease. You'll hear a lot of terminology that you're not used to. Don't hesitate to ask. You heard one tonight that actually Commissioner Prescott considers a swear word. It's a cul-de-sac. I mean, we know, we generally know what that is, but when those terms come up, non-conforming uses being grandfathered in, a conditional use permit, don't hesitate to ask those questions, and don't hesitate to reach out to staff. You don't have to wait just for the meetings. Don't hesitate to reach out and ask those questions. I want to talk a little bit, and I think that another issue that comes up, but I think we had a good discussion on it last month, were conflict of interests. And those are always important to be aware of. Again, I think, like I stated last time, is that we always have a conflict of interest, whether, it might not be in our neighborhood, but it's obviously in a friend's or an acquaintance's neighborhood. And sometimes when that application comes forward, we might think to ourselves, I wonder what John thinks about that application, and which might be okay to ask, but if feel that its impact on John would impact our decision differently than following the city's ordinance, that's a situation where you say, well, maybe I do need to declare a conflict of interest and step out of this one. But again, everything that you see is going to be, even though it might be several steps removed, could be a conflict of interest. And if you feel like it is one, you can just close that. If you don't feel like it's going to influence your vote, then you can go ahead and go move with the discussion and the voting after you disclose that. Again, and I said this before, the reason that your recommendation to the city council is so important is because you are considered, the term that they use is apolitical. In other words, you're not influenced by externalities. You're influenced by what is in the code. Code, where you have the ability to shape and recommend policy changes. An example of that is tonight when Commissioner Ackett said, you know what, I would really like for us to talk about the minimum widths of lots. With people having, we might need to think about the width of our lot, of the lots that we have. And so then that's
Mr. Garside, if I can interrupt for just a second, you're freezing up every sentence or so, sometimes not so bad, but I don't know if there's anything you can do to adjust your microphone or something that might help.
I could do that if you let me hook up to Utopia like you folks are. What I'll do is I'll turn off my camera, which will do everyone a huge favor, so you don't have to look at me, but my bandwidth. So I'll go ahead and do that.
Thank you.
All right, let me know if that helps out a little bit.
Sounds good.
Anyway, and so again, you're apolitical, which means that you're not influenced by anybody, and then you make that completely render that to the city council, and then of course, them being the political body they are, they make that final decision. And so, even though you take pride in your work, please don't be offended and have too much pride in authorship if the city council does something different than what it is that you recommend. So staying on that apolitical and that conflict of interest, I want to give you a scenario, and then I'd like to have, let's say that a developer approached you on the side as a planning commission, says, hey, I've just picked up this piece of property, and I'm going to do a development there, and it's going to require at least a zone change, maybe a general plan change. And I just kind of want to get your input on it. And by the way, and I can't let this cat out of the bag, but I think that, so-and-so is going to be my anchor tenant. But anyway, I don't want you to share that with anybody, but I just wanted your input to see if I'm even headed down the right path. If you think that this will work, if the Planning Commission and City Council will accept that, and if you think it's a good thing for the city. And then you as a Planning Commission might say, yeah, I mean, personally, I like it, but I'm also going to have to look at it just from a planning standpoint. So, I can't tell you what they're going to do, but this is kind of how I feel. So I'd like your input on that scenario. Not everybody at once.
So, Mr. Garside, I don't know if I have an answer, but you made a distinction. You made a distinction as far as offering personal opinion, as well as still indicating that you're upholding the ordinances and needs to meet, planning concerns. And I'm curious about that from a standpoint of, because I don't know the answer, so I'll just throw it back out there for others. But is that okay to even express that opinion? And then to your question, I guess, are you asking, should that be declared as a conflict of interest down the road if this is a buddy that came up to you and is kind of trying to leverage that relationship to push something through?
Yeah, good insight. If you have someone approaching you regarding a development and they're approaching you because you're on the Planning Commission, it's one you should politely say no. Your response should be, you know what, we meet as a body and we're not to be lobbied. If you want to lobby somebody, that would be a member of the city council. But we want to hear your input, but we would like to hear it as a body. You can set up a time with our staff to come in and present that to us. And you can also, even before that, meet with staff so that you can see exactly what the general plan and the proposed zoning would allow you to do on that property. And so that's the best way to do that. Now, they might catch you in that in a situation where they say, well, what do you think about this? And that's just simply one that you would disclose. When we went to the Planning Commission meeting, you could say, by the way, this developer came up and started to talk to me about this development. We didn't have much of a discussion because I said, you know what, you need to bring it to the commission as a whole. And so those type of outside conversations with applicants should always be disclosed to the rest of the commission. And you should let them know that. Just to let you know, you've approached me on this and I'm not comfortable talking about it without the rest of the commission hearing what it is that you have to say. And so when you do come, I'm going to let them know. I mean, not in a negative way, just to make sure that everything is out on the table. So there's no questions about anybody trying to do an end run on any of the processes.
Question for you. So speaking from the perspective of a developer coming to a commission member, what if it's just a member of the public? For example, last month after our session, I had a member of the public reach out to me, wanted to meet with me to discuss other, projects or concerns. And I reached out to Teresa. She indicated I should steer them towards the city council, which I did. But I'm curious if those rules are different for a developer that's coming in with a potential project or idea versus just a member of the community that wants to share some thoughts.
Great question. And the answer to that is hard. And most people think I'm going to say that it depends, but no, it doesn't depend. is it, can you determine what their motivation is? Do you think that they're trying to influence you one way or the other on a specific project? If they just have some thoughts in general as about, some planning ideas or whatever, you could take that down, or even better, say, those are some great ideas. Why don't you come and we'll give you 5-7 minutes in our work meeting, and you can share those with us. Or like Teresa said, if it's a concern that maybe ought to be heard by the city council first, then they could be sent that way as well. But yeah, if they just have some ideas like, something as simple as, I don't like the size of our park strips. And they can explain why, and you can say, well, if it's that big of an issue and you think it needs an ordinance change, then maybe you ought to present that to the city council. If they say, we need some other zoning change, again, you can say, well, you can do one of two things or both things. You can actually come and express your concern to the planning commission, or you can go in front of the city council. And if city council feels that way, then they can direct us to entertain and review an ordinance that would make that change.
Steve, you could remind the person too that there's opportunities in what we set up as public hearings, both on the planning side as well as the city side. And speaking just recently, coming off of our recent rezone request change there on Island Road, the public hearing was invaluable to me in that it provided information on both sides that I took into consideration. And interestingly, along the way, I was approached and asked what my thoughts were. And my answer was, I don't know yet. I haven't made a decision. I will be taking in even more information between now and when the council meets. I'll wait until that time. So I'd be cautious in maybe steering a particular direction until, my point is, until you have all the information.
Absolutely. That's a great segue to our public meetings. When I envision our public meetings, I'm still kind of thinking of you up on the dais as we have conversations, and so I'll talk about that as well as in this Zoom world that we're in. You just have to remember that in our public meetings and especially in our public hearings, that you're definitely under the microscope, okay? And so whenever there is an exchange going on, one thing that I always strongly recommend is that there be no side conversations. That's where one commissioner might lean over to the other one and whisper something. And it could be something as simple as, hey, Morgan High School just made it to the finals in volleyball. But the perception from the crowd is, okay, why are they having a side conversation? What is it that's going on? And so I strongly recommend that there be no side conversations during the public meeting. If there's a comment that needs to be made, then it should likely be heard by all. And especially if it's something as important as the building's on fire, we don't want that to be whispered, and we all want to be able to get out. So recommend that not happen. And that would be the same thing in the situation we're in right now. Texting. If you had a question with another commissioner, to send them a text while this meeting is on. I would discourage that. It does a couple things. Of course, nobody knows because you are texting. But if someone got wind of it, that you were texting during a meeting, and then they could make a grandma request, and they could look at more than just your texting on your phone. So just be careful with that.
With regards to that, a question during the meetings. Now, I know we've used this since we've been on Zoom, but with using the chat, it's a nice feature of Zoom. It's good to have. However, for me as a facilitator, I don't always notice the chat, or I notice it after we've moved past a topic. So I'm curious if there's any best practices that you're seeing emerging. Do we just learn to incorporate that a little bit better? Do we say, let's just verbalize everything and not use the chat, or is there really no recommendation there?
Yeah, that's would be at yours and the commission's discretion. I mean, obviously, some people are comfortable with it because that's maybe the world that they live in, and others of us, will see the not get to it quick enough before it disappears. And so, especially if the public is involved, I would just say, we're not going. I'm likely not to pay attention to the chat. If there's something that you need to say, you can get my attention by raising the hand, by wave or whatever, and we'll take your comment. Or if you feel comfortable with it, you can say, go ahead and put items in the chat, and before we conclude each item, I'll review the chat. So really not a best practice, is just everybody does it different, just whichever way they're comfortable.
Sure, thank you.
And then back to the public hearings, and that's exactly what those public hearings are designed to do. That we heard is that we have that exchange of information. The staff and sometimes the commission, and a lot of times the applicant, will be educating the public. The public will be giving us information that sometimes we hadn't thought of, or we get to hear their perspective. And that's exactly what that is supposed to be. We're not getting permission from the public to go forward with it. It's not, we're not trying to persuade anyone. We are just wanting to have that exchange of information, which is critical for a good decision. I mean, that's the way good decisions are made, not when the room is filled with yes people, but people that are willing to share a different perspective. And then we distill and end up with a better decision. We also have to remember that the public that is at the meeting is not representative of the city as a whole. I mean, you think about the times maybe you have been inclined to go to a public meeting, and it's simply because the way you felt about an issue, and you were representing you and maybe a couple other people of like-mindedness. And so one thing that should not happen is for someone to say, everybody here who is in favor of this proposal, would you please raise your hand? Or if anybody, those of you that are opposed, I mean, that doesn't work. All that does is incite and encourage the divisiveness and encourage the debate and the attempts to persuade. And so we just listen, we have an exchange of information. And then remember, you as a planning commission, your safety net is always in the code. I mean, that's one of the responses to the public. You can absolutely say that. And we've had none of the members of this commission were present at the time where we had standing room only in the council chambers, and it was on a group home that was up there. And oh, were you there, Jim? Okay. All right. Anyway, and it was pretty hotly contested because nobody in the neighborhood wanted to have a group home. Very few were. Well, and it wasn't necessarily because of our code, but because of federal law, the city's hands were tied. And so even though we had all that emotion and energy in the room, once that was explained to them, then obviously their frustration and their anger was focused elsewhere. And then I think that my recollection is they came up with a solution. And I say this jokingly, but they actually did it in this situation. They got together and somebody bought the home, so there wouldn't be a group home there anymore. But otherwise, the planning commission, the city council's hands were tied in that situation because of federal law. And so when we have these public hearings, we go into them with the idea that we're going to have an exchange of information here. Hopefully we're going to learn something so that our decision is a better decision. And as far as the public hearings go, we want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to speak. But I think that the longer they go, the more problematic they become. And so my rule of thumb is every person only gets to speak one time. including the developer, unless they're answering questions that the chair thinks is appropriate. You limit the time that they speak, and that you ask them that if the topic that they want to address has already been addressed, that they keep it short and simply say that, I just support so-and-so in their comment, or that it's already been heard. And so if you've got something new, would like to hear from you, but if it's the same thing, would prefer to move on. Anyway, because a lot of those things, a lot of these public hearings, they come down to this. Do you know what the difference between a conservationist is and a developer is? The conservationist already has his cabin in the woods. And so we just have to remember where the folks are coming from. And again, your safe haven is in the code. Anyway, so I've blasted through a lot of material. If you have any questions, or if there's another part of that topic you'd like me to expound upon, I'd be happy to do that. Yes, sir.
Mr. Dixon.
Steve, I've got a question for you. So as you brought up the public hearings, one of the comments that I've heard and my wife has been hearing in our neighborhood is that people were not aware of a public hearing. So I think we have a responsibility to inform those who are within a certain number of feet from proposed development. I'm not sure what that is, but we have a lot of folks down the Island Roadway who felt like they did not know about the development project and would have liked to have given a voice to that particular issue. How is that done? What are the minimal requirements for that, and how is it communicated?
Okay, that's a great question that's misunderstood by probably only about 98% of the population. Really, the only time that the public notices will go out, and Weston can correct me on this if I misstate this, is actually at the time of the zoning change. Once the zoning is in place, and it could be a decade later that somebody comes in with the development, if it's totally in compliance with that zoning that's already taken place, then there would be no public notice for the project. That basically what they would need to do, what citizens need to learn to do is do a quick check of the agenda for their planning commission and city council. Weston, anything different on that?
No, same thing with an annexation.
Correct.
But those original public notices, what's the radius that those are sent out to, and as far as posting these things in the newspaper or wherever they're posted?
And as a city, you can come up with your own ideas. I mean, some cities will actually put signs on or near the property so that people driving by and in the neighborhood can see them. Sometimes it's in the paper. Sometimes it really only has to be on the public notice website. There are times, and Teresa can address this, that we actually will mail out notices to people within, I think it's generally 300 feet. Isn't that right, Teresa?
That is correct. We go through the code with our city recorder when she goes through her training, and the city has adopted this policy at this time that we do 300 feet of a zoning change of this subject property or general plan change, annexation. If it's, we've had in the past where we as a city, Jim Brown will attest to this when we were talking about when we started doing the historic overlay zone, because it is a policy change for the entire city. We're obviously not going to send out notices with a letter. That would be in a notification in the newspaper, and other items. We did have a time here for a little bit that our paper was not in circulation. And so we have a public notice website. We have our Morgan City website, and we are required to put them in public places. So that would be the post office, the bank, and the library is how we do all of that posting. But like I said, if it's allowed in the zone, those are not, we're not going to do an individual notification.
That was a long answer to a relatively short question, Commissioner Dixon. Any follow-up to that you wanted?
No, thank you. I think that was helpful, and I had understood some of that. I guess the question that I have, or follow-up to that, it's we got some individuals, and they may be more than 300 feet away, but are still impacted. And I guess the message for them is go out there, pay attention to those public notices, look on the website. So that's what I've been communicating to people. But
Good.
I was just curious. Thank you.
It's only 3 times a month, right? 1 planning commission meeting, 2 city council meetings.
I do like the idea of posting a sign on the subject property. I've seen that done before. Is that something that we've entertained as a city, or would we prefer not to do that?
I haven't been given direction either way. So again, that's one where the planning commission could make a recommendation for the city council to consider that for adding to the notice requirements.
Thank you. Mr. Ackett has his hand up.
You know, one thing that I feel when I think about our meeting and the lack of knowledge that I have and inexperience, I think about Jim being on the commission forever and what he's been through and what he's seen, and like I'm so naive compared to that, right? My knowledge is so meager, and I feel like what's going on in the market and what's going on in our economy with COVID accelerating the influx of people here and the demand for development. And I really feel like because we only get a limited amount of time to connect once a month, that I feel so inadequate about the accelerating population and the market and the conditions compared to our ability to revise the code or suggest revisions. Or I feel like there's such a huge gap there. Like we have such a limited time and we have such a limited amount of ability to shape our vision compared to the just like we're being overran by red ants coming to the mound. And it's like, I wish we could close that gap a little tighter. And I'd love any recommendations on how can we get smarter faster, and how can we have better dialogue faster and quicker. And sometimes I wonder to myself, like, is one meeting a month even enough? Like, I almost feel like we should meet more and we should talk more and we should shape our vision more and we should accelerate the general plan's time frame. And I just really feel inadequate about the speed of the world and the speed of our connecting and learning. And my desire is to close that gap in any way possible.
I'm sure there's a few people who can jump in on that. Go ahead, Steve, and I have a comment after you.
Sure. And the first thing I would say for you to look at is where do you feel that your code is lacking? And so that's where you would start, because I mean your code has, like they say in the real estate industry, has good bones. This house has good bones. Your ordinance has good bones. That doesn't mean it can't be tweaked. And so that would be what you do is, first of all, is as you familiarize yourself with the code, where do you feel that it's lacking? And then we prioritize those things. And once they start moving, if someone comes in with an application and we're in the midst of an amendment, we can make sure that they comply with that amendment. If there's nothing going on, then obviously they're vested in the code the way it exists right now. And so I think that you should feel good that you've got a code. No code is perfect. And so again, find those deficiencies, let's prioritize them, and then we can move forward that way.
And if I can add to that, one of the things too is what you did tonight. You had a concern about setbacks and lot widths. And because of that, we can add that to a working session as an official agenda item, and we can have that conversation. To Steve's point, if you're finding that there's other aspects of the code that you'd also like to look at, and this is true for any of us, and we've done this before with fencing ordinance, with mixed use purposes and other things that we've discussed. We can get those on the agenda and talk about them in the working session. If they're not on the agenda, it's hard just to have a free format type of meeting and make sure we get everything covered and make sure we've done our homework beforehand. Because what happens is once we get these on the agenda, then we'll know if we have enough time to talk about them. And if we need to extend more time, we can, because we know what we want to talk about. And we can also come prepared. So it allows me an opportunity to leverage the collective resources of this commission and set some assignments, and we can come back to the next meeting prepared with those assignments fulfilled and have a robust discussion that's going to be a lot more impactful than coming in cold. And so what you're doing is the right thing. We just need more of that, and what parts of the code we can talk about.
Sure. Now that we brought this up, one of the things that I've been doing this for a couple years now, and it seems like, and down Island Road was a really good example. It seems like some of the frustrations is that when a developer comes in and wants to develop a piece of property, and it's really not what we would like to see in our city, but it's already zoned, and it seems like that we're behind the 8 ball from the very beginning. And it's what was brought up earlier, that can we, I've never heard, if we can meet as a body, make some recommendations to the council on the property A, B, and C that's zoned right now, whatever it's zoned, but it's not in accordance to the way we see the city growing. And we've had this conversation before, and I've had the conversation with Ty Bailey before about this, and they say it's in the works, but it just seems like what Jason says, that everything's moving so fast that people are buying up property, and a developer will look and go, ooh, this is a good piece of property because it's zoned R18 or R110 or whatever he sees, and that he can make a lot of money. And we're not wanting a lot of that in the city. So I guess my long question is there a way for this body to meet, take a look at some of these outliers that's on the outskirts of the city limits, and see if we can make some recommendations and make some changes before we go, oh, I wish that wasn't zoned like that. These narrow, long lots, they're not very pleasing to what we're trying to do.
Sure,
I don't know if that made any sense.
Absolutely it does. And so that, in addition to looking at your code, is that you would sit down, whether it be in a meeting or you do it on your own, and you look at the zoning map to see what is allowed out there right now. And if there are concerns, and any change you want to make is consistent with the general plan, the city can be an applicant for a zone change. And so if you find some that are not consistent with the general plan, current or as the new one comes on, then yes, the planning commission could make those recommendations to city council saying, hey, these are not consistent with the direction we want to go. Just like if there's a problem with the code, if there's a problem with your zoning inventory, let's do that inventory and make some recommendations.
Thank you.
If I might, Thursday night, there's actually a public session meeting, to give input to that group that's working on the master plan change. That'd be an awesome time for you and any of your folks you know of to join that meeting between 6 and 8. That'd be an awesome time to give input in 2 days, whatever those kinds of things you're thinking about.
Good point, Mayor.
How do you access the meeting, Ray?
You should have been sent a link. Teresa, can you send out that link to Thursday night's meeting to all these folks?
Yeah, we can go ahead and do that. And it's actually a couple of nights, this Thursday and is it next
Wednesday? The following Wednesday.
following Wednesday? So I'll send you that link.
But spread the word, put that on your media, on your Facebook or wherever, spread the word. We'd love to have as many people join in as will to give input in this process, either this Thursday or next Wednesday or both.
Teresa, could you do me a favor and email me the general plan and the zoning of the city?
Yeah, I can do that. It's also in your book you received on the back.
Oh, okay.
Are you wanting the written general plan that was in 1999?
Here's the map.
Yeah, your map would be in the back.
Okay. All right. Perfect.
And the website, the city website, has a really nice interactive map with the zoning overlaid with property boundaries and things like that. If you haven't used that particular map, it's pretty sleek.
Perfect.
Also, just to let you know, if you go on Morgan City website under planning and zoning, it'll link you up to the website that's set up for the new general plan. Let me just show you what it looks like. So this is our website, and it just says, well, you know, that you can go in there and provide input of what you're interested in for Morgan City and Morgan County. And you just click here and I'll take you to the website. And this is set up with the group that is doing the general plan update. And all this information, here's your public meetings, when they are, what time, things like that. Get involved. So good sharing portion for all of your, you know, let people know about it.
This must have come from all them awesome women at the city. Right, Teresa?
Yes, thank you.
There's also one of those sites set up for the new plan change too. You can access at your convenience along the way and give new input to that group, that plan change. They've also got one set up called Go Morgan. And maybe if you want, Teresa, find that, send that out to you as well. You can access that anytime you'd like and put in more input.
We have a code that manages backup power generators, for example, whether it's on the side of the home, the back of the home. If we're talking about narrower lots, it's not real nice to have a nice big alternate power source right next to your bedroom window if you're a homeowner. I don't know if there's even regulation or a code that covers that, just out of curiosity.
I got to address that, Mr. Brown. I would have to go through the code and find something, but off the top of my head,
And that's not appropriate. I mean, I just, yeah. If you just
no, it's a quick addressing, but I think it would be really tied to a noise ordinance issue more than anything.
I just wonder if there, we ought to look at that and say, okay, it should be out back of the home or something. I don't know. As we talked about, the lots are getting narrower, or in some places we're really condensed and frontages are not very much. And so, yeah, you want as much
It is timely and something, Mr. Brown, that, again, as part of looking at that code, and if it is covered in the noise ordinance and that's good enough, then that's good enough. If we're in a spot where more and more homeowners are starting to buy these alternative power sources that are, kick in when the power goes out and make all kinds of noise and what have you, it's not specifically covered, then it's worth looking at. So maybe Wes, if you wouldn't mind, when you do look at that, just to follow up and determine if the noise ordinance covers that, and if not, then maybe bring that to our next meeting to talk about in the working session.
I think the windstorm kind of brought that to light in a few places, I guess is my point.
Well, and then more and more.
Yeah, it's becoming a common thing, and because people can afford it and it's out there, and they like that convenience, and I think it's a great idea. I just, as a planning commission, I think it's something we might want to look at for the future of our community.
We have another hand up, Mr. Ackett.
So just in the spirit of trying to bring up relevant topics as I look into the future, when I look at the zoning map in the city of Morgan, I just think 100 years from now, there's no place in Morgan City, in my personal opinion, and I understand Ivory agrees with that, but I don't see the city of Morgan proper being an agricultural area. And I see on the zoning map, there's several outlying areas where there's agricultural zoning in our city. And I know that's coming from the history of Morgan and things like that, but I'd like to bring that up from my perspective, that we review in a long-term view that there be no agricultural areas in our city. And that, obviously based on the head shakes, not everybody agrees with me, but I think the city is quite small, and the areas that we're probably, past our lifetimes, you can imagine this being a populated city all the way, it'll just be little by little and that agriculture will go away. And so just my thoughts, maybe they're narrow-minded, I don't know, maybe they're lack of experience, I don't know, but I don't feel like in 100 years or 1,000 years that, at some point this city is going to have any agricultural areas. And so I'd be interested in that personally.
And one place where you can express that, I think, when you're talking such a long range plan, would be in the conversation that the mayor mentioned on Thursday and thereafter, where you can talk about, Vision 2050 and what you see within the city limits, making those suggestions, recommendations, and seeing how you can influence that general plan revision, which is happening right now. And you have as much a right as any other citizen in the community to share those. So I would recommend starting there.
I think you just touched on information. There are two maps, most of you I think realize a general plan map and a current city zoning map. The current city zoning map, yes, does have agricultural areas. That's currently what it is. But the Morgan City general plan, there's not any agricultural areas listed in the general plan, which is what the map is proposed to be in the future. So I don't know if you know that those two differences, those two maps, but the Morgan City general plan map does not have any agricultural areas listed in it. It's already taken care of, Jason.
He's a visionary.
Okay.
It's already done.
Yeah, I was looking at the zoning map and just
look at the general plan. Look at the general plan map.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any other questions for Mr. Garside with respect to the role of the Planning Commission and the training that he presented? Steve, I would just like to thank you for coming prepared and continuing to guide this body and help us grow as a commission. It's helpful to me. I'm not in this nearly as long as Jim. I'm only 6 years into this, but I learned something every session I go to, and I appreciate your guidance through that. So thank you.
Well, and I appreciate working with such a conscientious commission. I mean, it's great. I mean, obviously your hearts are always in the right place, and sometimes, Weston and I, sometimes we might, be the wet rag on the parade, but we're just trying to keep you headed in the right direction. But again, your conscientiousness, your desires, your motivation for the city is commendable, and just want you to keep it up.
I would personally like to thank every one of you also for being members of this group. As we look in the future, some of you expressed as we move in the future, things are going to be different. We need you people. I appreciate you all being part of this process. And the thing I like about it is you have different opinions and ideas. Please speak those. It's awesome that you speak your thoughts and your feelings. And as we discuss those back and forth, I would like to please have none of you get offended if someone disagrees with you. The most effective functioning committee is one that can speak what they honestly feel. And at the end of the meeting, when the decision is made, they can support what the decision was made. And nobody feels ostracized, nobody feels like everybody's against them. Please work that in your current feelings. If just because somebody disagrees doesn't mean they don't like you, doesn't mean they don't like your thought process. That's the one piece I think that makes a commission or a council very, very healthy, to feel like they can speak their mind and not be offended if somebody else speaks differently. But thank you for being here. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for your diligence and wanting to serve the city.
Nathan, can I make a comment as well?
Absolutely.
I'm going to piggyback on the mayor for just a moment as well. What I appreciate is the diligence that you have done in the last few years, as you have brought things, have made recommendations to the city council. Early on, when I was a city council member, often we would get a recommendation from the planning commission that would have 5 or 6 caveats with it. We recommend this as long as the developer agrees to do this, and this, before the city council grants final approval. So I just want to say I appreciate the fact that you are sending us things up where all the T's have been crossed, the I's have been dotted, and we no longer have to sit in city council trying to decide whether or not to grant final approval, not knowing if there's a bunch of things left undone. That used to be very frustrating, and that does not happen anymore. That's because of the work that you do, and I know the mayor knows what I'm talking about. So we appreciate that very much. So thanks for your diligence and your due diligence as you study these issues and you pass them on to the city council. So again, I agree with the mayor. Thanks for what you do. Sometimes it's a thankless job that you do, but we appreciate it.
I appreciate that. This is the best part of the meeting. Who else wants to praise the commission? But in seriousness, thank you. That feels good to hear that and recognize that it's being noticed. So thank you.
Mr. Chair, along that lines, I think Ms. Woods sent out an email a week or so ago. Somebody had made thank you to the commission. So I don't know if everybody got a chance to see that or not, but that was nice just to get.
I agree. It was nice. I read that, and it was the kind of email you enjoy reading. So thank you. I think we're winding down. Any final questions before we wrap up for the night?
Mr. Chair, seeing none, I make a motion that we adjourn.
Thank you. Motion. Now I always get confused on this because something I can just adjourn the meeting, correct? Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
There you go.
See y'all.